Me in studio is energy expert Clyde Mallinson. Clyde, thank you for coming in. Good morning. Or afternoon, in fact. What's the status of the grid right now? It looks like things have been a little bit positive, especially on the energy availability factor side.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure. Look, I appreciate these weekly updates that we're getting from the Minister of Electricity, but I always feel that they lack something of a message of slightly longer-term hope, if I can put it that way. So to unpack what happened in the last week and say this unit came back on, that unit went off, this one was meant to come back on, but it didn't come on, is a little bit like, it doesn't really give the sort of message of hope that I think we need as South Africans. So there's been slight improvements in June in particular. The availability of the coal fleet was better, but it was only better because they put less on planned maintenance. So the units that were being planned to be shut down, there were fewer of them, which meant there were more units available to deliver. And they always do that over winter. They say in winter time we're going to do less planned maintenance, so that we have more units available.
Yeah.
Of course, the unplanned maintenance is not in their control. So they hope that by having less planned maintenance, there's more available. And then one of the interesting things in June is the wind ran at over 50% capacity factor. Wind was producing, 600 megawatts more than it does on average. And so the combination of having more coal available in June, plus stronger wind, led us to be able to have a little bit of a respite in June. And you remember June there was a reduction in load shedding. Come July, and that cold snap we had, we went back to stage 6, and we pretty much seem to be stuck in somewhere between stage 2 and 4 at the moment, with the Minister himself indicating that we can expect to potentially go higher when the next cold snap comes in.
But things could have been worse. Right? I mean, if I remember correctly, the Minister of Electricity had indicated that they were expecting us to even get up to stage 8 load shedding at the worst in the peak of winter.
You must remember that stage 6 is actually a shortfall of 8. Because when the rest of us go to stage 6, the energy-intensive users are giving us 2. So when we at stage 6, the country's actually short of 8. If we're short of 10, we'll go to stage 8. The Minister also said that there's been less demand than expected this winter. So is it good that the economy is using less electricity? It's nice in terms of being able to meet that demand, but I'm not sure that it's that an encouraging sign to say, oh, well, a lot of the big smelters and things shut down in winter because they can't afford the electricity price, and therefore we have a lower demand. It's kind of, the economy has taken some strain, the demand has dropped, the coal fleet is pushing out a bit more, the wind blew well, we're okay, but it's short-termism.
Yeah. Let's talk about the reliability of the units, because even as you indicate that there are less units that were taken on a planned maintenance.
Yes.
The electricity minister seems to suggest that the units have been holding, so we haven't seen a lot of units breaking down, which has helped us at least maintain the lower stages of load shedding.
Yeah, look, the best way I like to track it is looking at year-on-year performance. And this year, year-on-year compared to last year, we have lower availability of the coal fleet. There's been a downward trend, an inexorable downward trend over many, many years. And so if we look at the availability in 2023 year-to-date, it's significantly less than 2022 year-to-date, which was significantly less than 2021 year-to-date. So, the fewer units that are running or maybe running better, but basically it's a declining return from the coal fleet. That's the message.
You mentioned slight improvements, even if it's in the short term. How does Eskom maintain that consistency?
Well, they don't maintain consistency. That's the problem, is the performance of the coal fleet is inconsistent. And so they have a measure at the moment where they have an expected, a low and a high breakage of the coal fleet. And they expect 15,000 megawatts to not be available due to breakages or partial load losses. They hope that it will be only 14, and we've been running at probably more than 16. So we're running at the high end of the unavailability of units that have not been planned to be taken off for maintenance. But the best way to describe it is that are not performing. They're broken.
Yeah.
But of course, if you've got 16 or 17 broken instead of 15, but you've only got 2 or 3 unplanned instead of 5, then you can add 3 back to the broken ones, and we're still running at an availability of about 19 out of 38 in total, which gives us about a 50%, maybe 51, 52% availability of the coal fleet.
How worried should Eskom be about the coal front that's coming? It's already incredibly incredibly cold today, and I think Kgosientsho Ramokgopa did indicate that this is something that will keep him up at night.
Look, cold fronts come every winter. It's not an unexpected occurrence. We just don't know exactly when they're going to come. The problem with the cold fronts is it gives us capacity challenges more than energy challenges. In other words, we're unable to meet the spike that tends to happen at 7 o'clock in the evening. That's the problem with cold fronts. So they're basically appealing to people at the very time when you would love to switch your heater on, because it's the coldest time of the day, please don't switch your heater on. I remember many years ago in Makandla, when I used to live there, they used to ripple control our geysers. And always, when it was the coldest time in winter, we never had hot water, because that's when there was an issue.
And that's what they're considering now.
Well, they do that in many places, but it normally ends up that you're not able to heat which is okay, because the thing about a hot water geyser is if you heat it up not at peak time, perhaps in midday, it'll still be hot at 7 o'clock in the evening. It's a storage system. That's what geysers are. Unless you've got an instantaneous geyser. They generally are batteries, if you like. They store heat energy. So many people who say, well, solar doesn't help me because I want to have a hot shower at 7 o'clock in the evening. Well, come and join me with my solar water heater, because it's at 7 o'clock in the evening the water's piping hot, because the solar geyser is a storage device.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Koeberg Power Station, Unit 1. Still not operational. The minister seems to be concerned about that. What's the impact of us having that unit out?
Well, I'm on record of having said that I didn't think Koeberg should be refurbished. I said it should play up till the end of its life, because I felt that its contribution to our need at the moment would be much greater if it gave us. It's like, I don't know if you follow cricket at all. They talk about the tail end of batsman wagging. So Koeberg was at the tail end of its life, and we needed Koeberg to wag, as it were, to produce, and then we would shut it down as per schedule.
When was it meant to be shut down?
It's meant to be shut down in 2024. And what they're doing at the moment is sort of trying to put in repairs and replace certain items that would allow them to potentially extend its life. But there's no guarantee that its life will be extended. It's a bit like a 1980s car, trying to retrofit it to current car standards. And you say ABS braking. You say, no, we can't do that. We can change the brake pads, but we can't put. What about airbags? Oh, in 1980s the cars didn't have airbags, so we can't really fit those. But don't worry. And it's not possible to retrofit an old nuclear plant to current safety standards. So we can maintain it at the safety standards it had, but we can't lift it to the new safety standards that have been put in place post-Fukushima, post-Chernobyl, post-3 Mile Island. So I've thought that it should run its course, because, boy, haven't we needed it in the last 18 months.
How much capacity does it give us, and is it not worth the risk, given the current crisis we're dealing with?
Well, the current crisis is partially because Koeberg is shut down for refurbishment at the moment. One thing we can say with absolute certainty is that since Koeberg went offline 18 months ago, We've had an extra stage of load shedding every single day because Koeberg hasn't been available. That's a fact.
And it doesn't help that there are delays in refurbishing it.
Well, it was meant to be 12 months for both units to be changed, which means it should have been up and running already. It's now going to be another 18 months before. So I made projections, you know. One guaranteed stage of load shedding in South Africa costs our economy per year in excess of 100 billion of lost economic activity. So irrespective of what it costs to refurbish Koeberg, we've lost upwards of 100 billion rand to the economy.
What's behind the delays, Clyde? Because this it's almost like deja vu. Remember Kusile and Medupi, the delays in finishing the project and more money costing a lot.
I can't put my finger on it, really. I mean, you know, the first delay when they were meant to do it in January last year, when they started 2022, when Framatome came, they said, right, we're going to pull out these steam generators and put them in a containment room. And someone said, which containment room? And they said, the one you've built. And they said, but we haven't built a containment room. And they said, well, you can't take these. So, you know, when you look at it at that level, it just seems incomprehensible that that should have happened. So it's a big, complex operation. And the thing that worried me when I looked at the economics of it is I said, well, Eskom have maintained it's going to cost 20 billion from 2010 when they first. We know that that's not possible. You can't have a thing in 2010 costing 20 billion, also costing 20 billion in 2023. Just take the exchange rate, for example. So we know it's probably going to cost more like 40, 50, 60 billion. Then you add on the 100 and something billion of loss to the economy. And with that amount of money, we could have built replacements of solar, wind and storage that could have done more than what what Koeberg is doing. And Koeberg would have stood its ground waiting for the replacements. In other words, it would have been the tail ender batsman saying, we're going to give you a chance to win this game by giving you some more time. Yeah. And that never happened.
Speaking of these old power stations, some of which are being refurbished, I want us to talk a little bit about Komati. You may have seen the videos that have gone viral of Kgosientsho Ramokgopa talking about how it was a mistake, maybe it should be recommissioned. Gwede has made similar statements as well. So government talks about decommissioning, but then on the other side talks about extending these power units so that we can get the benefit out of them. But are they serious about it? Because there's these senior government officials who say, Komati, we shouldn't recommission it because we're not getting the same value from 1,000 megawatts to about 200 megawatts from solar energy. What's your view on
look,
these
it was a very unfortunate statement, and when questioned this morning about it, the minister chose to answer it with the person who asked the question off record, as it were. Let's go and have a cup of coffee, I'll talk about it. Komati, power stations have a life that they can have. Normally halfway through their life, a bit like Koeberg, although Koeberg's more than halfway through. If it got extended, it would be to 60 years, and its life was 40. Coal stations can last for 60 years, but then at 30 years they have to have what we call a major overhaul. If you take your car to service, they'll say, oh, you're coming up for the big one now, timing chain, and you say, oh, you know, I just want oil and no, this is the big one. So midlife they have a big reservice, and then they can last for another period. Then they reach what's called the cold stop date, where the guarantees of safety, of maintenance on things like boiler tubes, pressure vessels, the equipment manufacturers will say, you're not allowed to run this thing past a certain date because it's no longer safe. And that's when they look and say, okay, well, we plan to decommission it then. So Komati's been in line for decommissioning for a long time now. And in fact, I think Komati's either got 6 or 8 units, I forget. But all of the units except the last one, I think it's got 8 units, all of the units except the last one had already been decommissioned. So the last one was doing about 120 megawatts when it was decommissioned.
And which was late last year?
Late last year. The previous ones were decommissioned over a period leading up to that. So for the minister to say that we've suddenly lost 1,000 megawatts from Komati was quite frankly misinformation.
So what he should have said is we've lost 1,000 over time.
We've lost 1,000 over time.
What's that period, though? Is it 2 years?
It would have been about 4 years. It would have been a program shutdown. And of course, when you programming and shutting down like that, the other facilities at Komati still have to be there. In other words, the water purification, a lot of the workers are still there. They're busy decommissioning the other things, but you're only getting maybe 1/6 or 1/8 of the output. So the cost of the electricity from that last unit is exorbitant if you measure it across the costs of keeping that whole facility still running. You can work it out. If you're only getting 1/8 of the output, your cost will be 8 times as much when you divide the total cost by instead of dividing the total cost of the thing by 8, you divide by 1, because there's only 1 in 8 working. So I estimate electricity from Komati in its last days was probably 6, 7, 8 rand a kilowatt hour.
How practical is it to recommission Komati? And would it be all the units, and what would be the consequences of bringing that to life?
I'll tell you how practical it is. If you had a really old house and you wanted to build a new house, it's more expensive to demolish the old house and try and rebuild it than to just start a fresh one from scratch.
But how long are you going to be done with the new house before it can start serving you?
Well, the point is that we don't need any new coal houses, basically. We've got alternatives. The notion of refurbishing Komati to act as a coal-fired power station is not a good notion. It's not necessary. The bits and pieces it would be for entertainment almost. It'd be like you taking a 1950s car and say, I'm going to refurbish this, and you say, I'm going to say, what do you do? I say, man, I take a drive on Sunday afternoon. And then I park it. This isn't going to be a workhorse.
Isn't the challenge that the alternatives we're talking about in renewables are not readily available? I mean, how much capacity from renewables is being added to the grid right now? So these projects also take time.
Right. So we're not adding enough because we've basically had a 5-year gap where we didn't add anything. It's as simple as that.
We started too late.
Well, I hope we haven't started too late, because that's just a bit desperate. If I say, well, there's no solution. We started late and we have to catch up now. So we probably have to triple our ambition of what we're wanting to add with new generation compared to where it's sitting in the IRP. And in particular, we're very, very slow on storage. We're way behind on storage. If you look at the system that it's going to be in, say, 2035, we're going to need 80 gigs of solar, that's 80,000, 50 gigs of wind, and 30 gigs of storage. We're behind on all of those, but in particular, we're not even in the frame with storage, if you know what I mean. We really, really need to do that, and that is the secret to unlocking the ability to put more on the grid. Is to have the ability to keep it in the fridge for when we want it, as it were.
How do we fix the transmission capacity issues that the Minister always says is worried about?
They're somewhat overstated, because we need that storage just for storing. But when you put storage in, the Minister used an analogy of roads and offshoots and everything. When you put storage into the grid, you increase the capacity of the grid at least twofold. If you think of the road from Tshwane to Johannesburg, at 8 o'clock in the morning, the Grayston off-ramp is a nightmare. But go 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's nothing on that off-ramp. So storage says, instead of all of the stuff flowing on the grid at peak time, we're going to put some of it in storage and use the grid to get it to where it needs to be outside of peak time. So we can double grid capacity with strategic placement of storage.
Yeah. Just lastly, when the electricity minister was brought in, the president had directives and the intentions around his role. From what you've been able to observe over the last couple of months, has the appointment of an electricity minister assisted us in dealing with this crisis?
I think it's been an improvement. You know, one of the good things is the one-stop shop, but I would prefer to call it a one-go shop. Because in the past we had 10 stop shops, if you know what I mean. Now at least there's only one stop shop, but you still have to get through that stoppage. So I think there has been an improvement.
Okay. Clyde, thank you so much for making time for us. Really, truly appreciate it. I'll be back with your leading stories at the top of the hour. Stay with us.